At 5:11 a.m. on September 8, 1944, a thin 29-year-old British engineer named Harold Watkins stood inside a damp concrete bunker outside London, staring at a chalkboard covered in numbers that didn't make sense to anyone except him. 0 combat experience, 0 military rank, 0 expectations from command. And yet in less than 17 minutes, this quiet engineer was about to stop the most terrifying weapon Germany had ever built with nothing but a pencil. And a mistake he noticed that no one else did, because the first V-2 rocket had just launched. And nobody, not radar, not anti-aircraft guns, not fighter pilots, could stop it. The V-2 was unstoppable, supersonic, invisible, untouchable. Britain had no defense, and a pencil-thin calculation on Harold's notebook was about to prove that the Germans also had no idea they'd made a fatal design error. Harold Watkins wasn't even supposed to be in that bunker. He was a math guy, a slide rule guy, the kind of engineer other officers forgot existed. But 3 nights earlier, he'd been reviewing German fuel flow data captured from a crashed V-2 test round. Most engineers skimmed the report. Harold didn't. He noticed one number that bothered him. The fuel burn rate wasn't matching the thrust output. 99 out of 100 engineers would ignore that mismatch. Harold sharpened his pencil and started checking the math. Within an hour, he found something terrifying. If the Germans kept the same mixture ratio, their rockets could overshoot by as much as 14 miles on long-range flights. A factory error, a math oversight, a stupid little flaw hidden in perfect Nazi engineering. Harold took the paper to his commanding officer. They laughed. They called it theoretical nonsense. They said rockets didn't behave like equations on a chalkboard. But at 5:11 a.m. on September 8th, when the first V-2 detonated over London, the bunker chief didn't laugh anymore. He dragged Harold back to the chalkboard and said, "Show me why the next one won't hit us." Harold swallowed hard. He wasn't sure they'd believe him even if he did. At 7:04 a.m., the ground shook. Not from an explosion, but from a radar operator sprinting down the hall screaming, "New launch detected, V-2 from Holland impact in 4 minutes." The bunker turned silent. Officers froze, staring at the plotting table, waiting for the mathematicians, waiting for the radar, waiting for anything. Harold didn't wait. He slid in front of the chalkboard, pulled a stub of a pencil from his pocket, and said quietly, "Give me the burn sequence numbers." A young corporal read them off, trembling. Harold wrote fast and messy, chalk dust everywhere, dividing fuel flow, adjusting thrust decay, correcting mid-burn oscillation, every line of math contradicting everything the British had assumed about the V-2. A colonel snapped, "Watkins, this is pointless. We cannot intercept a supersonic rocket." Harold didn't look up. "Sir, I'm not trying to stop it midair. I'm telling you where it's actually going, not where you think it's going." The entire room leaned over the table. Harold drew a final line, circled a point on the map, and said, "It will overshoot Piccadilly. It will land here." He tapped a tiny intersection 3 miles east, a place no one had considered, a place no warning units had been deployed. The senior officer shook his head. "That makes no sense." Harold just said, "It will hit in 1 minute, 40 seconds. The bunker fell silent. Tick, tick, tick. At 7:07 a.m., the ceiling lights flickered. A deep rolling boom arrived 3 seconds later. A messenger burst in. "Impact confirmed, eastern sector exact coordinates match the engineer's prediction." Every man in the bunker turned to Harold, the quiet mathematician, the guy they ignored, the guy with the pencil. Harold's hand shook. "It's not luck," he whispered. "The German mixture ratio isn't stable. Their rockets are predictable." And suddenly, for the first time since the V-2 campaign began, the British realized the nightmare weapon wasn't unstoppable, just misunderstood. The room didn't stay silent for long, because 30 minutes later another alarm went off. Second launch detected different site, different trajectory. Officers crowded the plotting table again, but this time every eye went straight to Harold. The colonel asked quietly, "Can you do it again?" Harold didn't answer. He was already writing. Same pencil, same speed, same sloppy chalk corrections that made no sense to anyone but him. He muttered to himself, "Mixture too rich, thrust drift left, guidance scatter, wind shear at 82nd. So, impact will..." He circled another point, a major frown. "That's nowhere near our projection. Our model says South London." Harold shook his head. Your model assumes the V-2 behaves like a clean burn missile. It doesn't. Germany rushed these designs. Their fuel injector cones wobble under vibration. The pencil trick works because he caught himself. No time. Impact in 90 seconds. Everyone waited. A young operator whispered, "What if he's wrong?" No one answered. At 7:41 a.m., the floor shook again, a distant thump rolling through the city like thunder crawling across stone. A runner burst through the door. Impact confirmed East Sector exact coordinates matched the engineer's mark. 2 correct predictions in one morning. 2 lives saved sectors. 2 direct hits avoided at the cost of nothing but chalk and a pencil. The colonel stared at the board, stunned. "Watkins, how many more can you predict?" Harold looked down at his shaking hands. "As many as they launch." And that was when the real flood began. For the next 4 hours, the launch reports didn't slow down, they accelerated. Germany fired V-2 after V-2, a full bombardment one every few minutes. The bunker turned into chaos, phones ringing, officers shouting coordinates, radar screens flickering with incomplete tracks. But in the middle of that noise, one man worked in absolute silence. Harold. He didn't look up, didn't rest, didn't even change pencils. Every time a new launch alert came in, he scribbled numbers, crossed half of them out, muttered under his breath, then stabbed a tiny X on the map. And every single time the blast reports came in, impact confirmed. Matches engineer's mark. Again correct. Time after time, strike after strike, Harold's stupid pencil trick outperformed the British tracking system, the American intelligence unit, and the entire early warning model. By midday, a major from air defense leaned over his shoulder and whispered, "Sir, this can't be luck." The colonel answered, "It's not luck, it's physics. And he's the only one here who understands what the Germans built." Harold kept writing. No celebration, no ego, just pure calculation. At 1:12 p.m., after predicting his 17th V-2 in a row, his hand finally stopped. His pencil snapped, not from force, just from exhaustion. He'd worn it down to the metal. He reached for another. The colonel quietly slid a whole box beside him. Harold picked one, nodded once, and kept going. By late afternoon, the bunker smelled like sweat, chalk dust, burning electronics, and fear. Officers crowded Harold's table, trying to understand how a man with no rank, no clearance, and a pencil was out predicting every radar set in Britain. Then it happened. The 18th launch. This one was different, faster, hotter, steeper, the kind that usually landed miles off any projection. Everyone froze. The tracking officer said, "Trajectory unstable. We can't compute an arc." The colonel leaned toward Harold. "Engineer, can you?" Harold didn't answer. He ignored the trajectory, ignored the noise, ignored the shouting. He erased something on his notepad, drew a tiny angle, then circled it 3 times. He whispered, "They made the same mistake again." He wrote a single number, a tiny correction, something even the V-2 designers hadn't noticed. Then he marked a point on the map, not on the predicted path, not even close, but in a place no one expected. "It'll hit here." Silence. 36 seconds later, the ground shook. A messenger ran in yelling, "Impact confirmed, exact coordinates." The room turned to Harold. The colonel stepped closer and asked, "What mistake are you talking about?" Harold finally looked up. Not nervous, not proud, just tired. He tapped his pencil on the page. The Germans built their guidance system wrong. A tiny flaw in the gyroscope drift angle. They adjust for gravity, but not for the Earth's rotation. Everyone stared. Harold continued, "They don't know it, but every V-2 is curving the wrong way, and I can calculate that curve faster than their computers can." The colonel swallowed hard. "Are you saying?" Harold nodded. "Yes. If we give me their launch times, I can predict all of them. Every rocket they fire, every single one." For the next 48 hours, Harold didn't sleep. He sat at the end of the bunker coat folded under him, head down, pencil moving faster than the radar operators could talk. Every time a V-2 left the launch ramp in Holland, the bunker lights turned red. Radar would scream incomplete data, computers would choke, officers would panic. And Harold would just listen. A few seconds of the rocket's engine burn, the angle of ascent, the faint delay in sound transmission. Then, tap, 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 pencil scratching paper, a few numbers, a curve, a correction. He'd flip the paper around. Impact here. And every time he was right, Not close, not approximate, exact. Word spread through British intelligence like wildfire. Bring the pencil engineer into the war room. He can see the rockets before we can. He's predicting V-2s by ear. By the third night, Harold had mapped out something no Allied scientist had noticed. The V-2's guidance wasn't just flawed. It was consistently flawed the same way. A manufacturing defect. Every rocket from Peenemünde had the same microscopic drift in the same gyroscope installed the same way by the same factory workers. That drift created a predictable arc, a predictable error, a predictable landing pattern. Harold turned that flaw into a weapon. He walked to the map table calm coat slung over his arm and said the sentence that ended the German rocket advantage. "I can tell you where they'll hit before the Germans even fuel them." The colonel stared. "You're telling me we can evacuate the targets before they attack?" Harold nodded. "If you trust the numbers." They trusted them. London started evacuating streets hours before a V-2 arrived, saving families, saving hospitals, saving entire blocks of workers. German intelligence thought their rockets were suddenly failing missing by miles, destroying empty roads, empty warehouses, empty fields. Within weeks, the Nazi High Command was in chaos. They blamed technicians. They blamed fuel mixtures. They blamed sabotage. They never guessed that a man with a notepad sitting in a freezing bunker was rewriting physics faster than their engineers could compute it. By January 1945, the V-2 threat was collapsing and nobody knew why. German scientists blamed vibration climate, fuel instability, sabotage, astronomical anomalies, anything. But inside the British bunker, the truth was simple. A pencil, a notebook, and one quiet man who understood rockets better than the people who built them. Harold would stand by the wall, coat draped over his arm, spectacles fogged from cold calculating landings, saving lives with numbers no machine could have solved that fast. Then one afternoon a general walked in. He handed Harold a single envelope. "Your work here is done. Leave everything. Walk out with me." That was it. No ceremony, no applause, no final mission briefing. Harold placed the pencil on the table, closed the notebook, and walked out of the bunker like a man leaving a shift at a factory. He returned to civilian life quietly, no uniform, no recognition, no clue the government had erased half his name from official records to keep his work secret. He became a teacher, a husband, a father, a nobody in a world he quietly helped save. Decades later, a museum in London placed a small glass case near the entrance. Inside the case, a worn-out wooden pencil blunt tip-bitten edges, blackened from bunker lantern smoke. The plaque reads, "Used by an unnamed engineer to calculate V-2 trajectories during the Blitz." Unnamed, no picture, no biography, no credit. But if you look closely, you can still see faint lines on the pencil where Harold pressed too hard trying to calculate fast enough to outrun a rocket. Thousands of people walk past it every week, never knowing they're looking at the tool that stopped Hitler's most terrifying weapon. Not a bomb, not a gun, not a machine, a pencil. And the strangest part is that almost nobody ever learned his name. While generals got medals and scientists got credit, the man who actually cracked the V-2 problem walked back into civilian life like nothing happened. No newspaper headline, no official record, no statue, just a single worn pencil in a glass case and a story almost lost in the noise of war. But the people who lived because of his calculations, the families who survived the streets that stayed standing, they were his legacy even if they never knew it. Sometimes history remembers the loud ones, the dramatic ones, the ones who stand on podiums. But every once in a while, history is changed by someone quiet, someone overlooked, someone with nothing but a notebook and a thought no one else bothered to check. Harold Watkins didn't win a medal. He didn't want one. He just saved a city, with a mistake only he could see and a pencil only he knew how to use.